Hello, everybody. Floppy Waffle 69 here, and welcome to 2026, guys. And with my first video of the new year, I figured we would actually go ahead and feature the Tier 8 Premium, I guess, what is it, Italian Battleship, the Roma. The Roma is an interesting vessel, that is for sure in this game. She, I believe, was introduced, God, 5, 6 years ago, maybe even longer. I can't really remember off the top of my head. Um, but yeah, she was introduced into this game, and I believe she was the first Italian battleship introduced into this game. I don't think the Cesare was. I definitely think the Roma was, but again, I could be wrong. Um, but yeah, it's been a while since this ship was added to the game, and I figured, why not feature this battleship? It has been a hot minute. Actually, as a matter of fact, I don't think I've actually mentioned this ship on my channel other than one video, and that video was done around 3, 4, maybe 5 months ago in my top 5 first buy premium ships, and I 100% stick by that on this ship. I actually quite enjoy this ship, even though this ship has a bit of a stigma in this game. People really don't like her a whole lot because of one glaring weakness, and that is her guns are very consistent in being inconsistent, to put it bluntly, right? This ship does it is very frustrating. These guns are incredibly frustrating, and not only are the guns incredibly frustrating, so are the shells. The shells are incredibly frustrating as well, as you see there on your screen. And when I go in later on to a little bit to talk about the stats, this ship does have a bit of railgun syndrome, which meaning that these ships and these shells do fly downrange at considerable amounts of speed. The only problem is these shells in particular are incredibly lightweight and have insane amounts of penetration, and the impact of these shells are hitting relatively high, which all those numbers, if you don't know what those numbers means, I'll tell you, is that these shells tend to fly right through armored targets, especially lightly armored targets, and get nothing but overpens. When you 100% have struck the Citadel armor, they go right through, they do not detonate inside, and they go into the ocean and the corresponding side of the vessel you're shooting at. Incredibly frustrating stuff, but I feel like a lot of people just don't understand how this ship can work well if you know where you're aiming and know when to shoot your guns. Okay, one thing that this ship does very well, at least in my opinion, these guns are only 380 millimeter guns, just like you have on the Vittorio Veneto on the main tech line Italian battleship line, is that these 380 millimeter guns do actually hit very hard on enemy ships, especially battleships that are heavily armored at longer ranges, because when they get to those distances and strike the target at that high impact speed, they still have a lot of retention on their penetration mechanics, so they actually do penetrate a lot. But again, now it boils back to the first problem with the ship, is that the shells do tend to spread out in a shotgun-like pattern. They go any which way other than hitting the ship where you want it to land. Like I said, it is incredibly frustrating, but if you know that's what you're getting and you know when you're getting into, the ship can be a lot of fun. You just have to find the right scenarios to make the ship work. And that's kind of what I want to do here with this video, is I kind of want to just highlight some gameplay in the background here and just talk a little bit about the Roma as it pertains to me and my opinion on why I think if you're looking for a premium battleship, even in 2026, there are a lot of good choices, but I still tend to recommend this particular vessel, not only for the improved credit income that this ship can do. I think it is an excellent crew trainer from that for the Christopher Colombo line. Even though this ship does have one major difference, the Christopher Colombo line, which is this doesn't have semi-armor piercing rounds, which again is a bit of a con if you think about it. I mean, SAP is going to be your most consistent shell type for either damage, just like raw alpha damage, because you can never overpen with it. You either get penetrations or shatters. So again, it's just going to lead to a little bit more consistency. And it's not like the HE on this vessel is really making up for that loss, right? The HE is very pathetic on this vessel. This was back when they were teasing a lot of, the Italian nation was going to have incredibly anemic HE levels, even more so than the Germans, for an example. This ship is only rocking, I believe, a measly 5,100 damage. It can go ahead and penetrate 64 millimeters, but only has a 24% fire chance, which again is not very impressive, especially when you compare it to the likes of a Vladivostok, for example, which again, you're not going to be shooting HE in the Vlad, but I'm just saying that thing has 41%, fire chance, right? And that's just crazy compared to the Roma. It's not even half of that almost, right? So actually it's just a little bit more than half. But anyways, enough about the little intricacies of the ship. I want to talk about why I think this ship is better than you think and why you shouldn't just go ahead and write her off, okay? Like I mentioned previously in the video already, that this ship has incredibly frustrating AP shells, and the HE shells are really nothing to write home about. It does not have access to the semi-armor piercing that the Colombo line does have, but what it does have it doesn't also have access to the fuel exhaust smoke. Not that you really use that a whole lot in your Italian battleships, and if I do see people utilize it, they really just use it or utilize it wrongly. They would like smoke up and they go ahead and shoot. Nice little dev strike on the Rigo, by the way. It's a good salvo. Again, and I'll get to that in a minute. But not they really utilize their smoke screens, right? So you're not really losing anything by not having the smoke screen on this vessel, right? It's mainly a disengagement smoke, and if you use it right, you can get yourself out of some like sticky situations. But again, the vast majority of the community doesn't do that. They don't really know how to utilize it. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay, but what you do have access to is you're actually incredibly stealthy with this vessel. I believe a full stealth build on the Roma is 11.7 kilometers, which is actually very, very good, which is nice. And your maneuverability actually isn't that bad either. You actually do pick up a decent torpedo belt reduction, I believe. I believe if we look at that real quick, you're actually having a 39%, which actually isn't that terrible. I mean, yes, it's nothing compared to the likes of like the Alabama at the 50s or like the 49% or whatever that thing's at. But again, 39% is nothing to disregard. That is going to help you take a couple of torpedoes more so and mitigate that damage, right? But again, you shouldn't want to eat torpedoes, but you do have that in the back of your pocket. So what does this ship like to do? Where does this ship like to play? This is definitely an aggressive battleship. At least that's what they try to sell it to you as. This ship tends to want to get up into the fray, utilize its stealth, and take advantage of its concealment. And then on broadside and cruisers, you can go ahead and schwack them. That's, in theory, what this ship wants to do. In reality, this ship really can't do that, okay? And the reason why this ship can't really do that, again, is boiling back down to the guns. Usually I find myself when I'm engaging and I get up within my stealth right around 11.7, 12 kilometers, I'm finding myself overpenning a lot of targets, especially the cruisers that I'm really sneaking up on, right? So I really don't think that's the way you want to play the Roma. I think what you want to do with the Roma is you actually want to stay anywhere between the 16 and 13 kilometer range, and you want to utilize your stealth to get onto flanks so that you have cross shots on enemy vessels. Okay, I will get into when I think you should pull the trigger compared to not pulling the trigger, but that's basically going to pertain on the enemy ship that you're shooting. Okay. But that's where I think the stealth really comes in handy. Also, Brisk is a phenomenal skill on this vessel. I would highly recommend it. With the Brisk skill activated, you will go well over 30 knots with the Sierra Mike flag as well. You're going basically Iowa levels of speed, which again is very nice, right? Another thing that is nice is, like I already mentioned, that these shells and the guns on this ship are rail guns. I believe if we look at the shell velocity, like coming out of the barrel of the guns here, you are rocking a considerable amount of initial speed, which is at 850 meters a second, which is awesome. Just to compare that to a ship that everyone should know that is infamous for having slower shells at tier 8 is the North Carolina. The North Carolina is sitting at 701 meters a second, so 850 meters a second is very nice to have because it should, in theory, allow you to land your shots from greater ranges, and you don't have to lead as much, right? That's what you want to do with this thing, okay? But yes, boiling back to the shells and what I want to talk about when it comes to pulling the trigger. Now, this is a very important thing that I think a lot of players don't understand, and it's going to break a lot of the understanding of when you should shoot your guns compared to like other ships. Okay, usually you want to wait till the ship is in its full turn, it's completely flat broadside to you. That's going to give you the least amount of armor you have to penetrate in order to score Citadel ribbons, and that's when you usually want to pull the trigger. Okay, I'm not saying that the Roma can't do that, but I am saying a way to mitigate a big disadvantage of this ship when it comes to the insanely high penetration of these shells is what you can do is you can wait till the ship is beginning its turn, okay? Because your shells are so fast at getting down range that you should realistically have very little time to turn back. Where other battleships, their shells are slower. Once they start their turn, they can pretty much end it, so to speak, and like turn in and still mitigate a lot of your damage, okay? Now, you will still get ricochets with this ship, but if you pull the trigger at the right moment, when the ship is just ever so slightly beginning its turn, your shells will zoom in, hit that angled section of armor and actually, because remember, the ship is, when it's angling, it's increasing its armor threshold. It's going to allow you to penetrate that thickened layers of armor that it's doing for its effective armor and actually score the big penetration and or citadel ribbon. This is the tactic I like to utilize a lot in my Roma when shooting enemy cruisers, especially the lighter ones. Okay, I know that at tier 7 and lower, lighter ones is kind of an oxymoron almost, because basically all cruisers are made out of paper, especially in the nowadays meta with overmatch. But again, you only have 380 millimeter guns, so you could go ahead and overmatch 25 millimeters of armor, but the 27 millimeters of armor are going to be a little bit of a hassle to get through, especially when coming in nose in. So you're going to have to still be aware of the vessels that have that and know where to shoot on the enemy vessel. Okay, but you can, by all means, really take advantage of this tip I'm trying to tell you and shoot when ships are beginning their turns. It's going to allow you to mitigate that big weakness that the Roma has when shooting at lightly armored targets. Now, in regards of battleships, I don't think you really have to utilize this method of mitigation, just because armor on battleships is thicker, so much thicker usually, that you really don't have to do that. Okay, you can basically just shoot at battleship broadside and you should get penetrations, no problem with it. The only big weakness that this ship does have is you only have 380 millimeter guns, so the damage coming out of these guns usually isn't the best compared to various other nations. Okay, the Roma's only clocking in at 12,000 maximum AP citadel damage. The North Carolina and Vladivostok, which both have 406s, are coming in at 13,100, right? So again, just kind of one of those things you have to play around with and understand that you have smaller gun calibers. You're going to have to pick and choose when to pull the trigger on certain vessels. That's all I'm trying to say, right? And again, it brings back a time when battleships actually used to have to do that. They couldn't just point and click on enemy ships and expect these large damaging salvos and or citadels. They had to be smart when to pull the trigger and basically aim the right part or right section of the vessel in order to translate to good, meaningful damage. That's all I'm trying to say when I'm talking about the Roma and its guns, because the Roma's guns are very finicky, and they are a bit frustrating. Well, not a bit. They are very frustrating at times, and I get it, guys. I played about 4 to 6 battles here to make sure I get a couple of battles to showcase with the Roma. Either were blowouts, or people made stupid maneuvers on me that they normally wouldn't do, and I just didn't really adjust to the stupidity of some of the players in this game, because that's what happens in random battles. You just really have no idea what situations and who you're going to run into in scenarios, right? It's all this stuff. And everything I try to tell you on my channel, I really try to help the player base, especially more of the average ones, right? I try to help you guys because I think a lot of other YouTubers are just showcasing a lot of their super unicum abilities rather than speaking to the vast majority of the player base, which isn't that way, right? The vast majority of the players are between the 45 and a 55% win rate, right? And I think that's where you have to tailor your advice, right? What we want by doing, what I wanted to do by creating this channel is I really wanted to help the player base get their win rates up, have more enjoyment in the game, and understand that, at least in my opinion, I really don't consider there to be a bad ship in the game. Yes, I understand the Krasny Krim exists. I understand certain other vessels exist, but I want to shed more light on that. I think some ships just require a higher level of IQ and more effort to make work, rather than some ships that are just a little easier to play, that don't really require much work, and they still get those massive damage numbers. Like, for example, the Cristoforo Colombo Ledge mod especially, right? The Libertad, just to name a couple. I don't really think there's too much thought process involved, because again, if you put a bad player in the Libertad, I still think they're going to, on average, get good results. But again, if you put a super unicum in a Libertad, they're going to get phenomenal results. Whereas, again, some of the ships in this game, or the vast majority of the ships in this game, it depends, okay? It's very skill level dependent on the vessels, and that's what I want to do with this channel. I just wanted to highlight that I don't really think there is bad vessels. There are just vessels that are harder to play and vessels that are easier to play, depending on what they're going to churn out in regards of the damage factor. I know it's a very lengthy explanation of what I've tried to accomplish, but again, hopefully this makes sense to all of you and what I'm trying to do here, okay? But as I digress, going back to the Roma and what I like about this ship, okay? First of all, I have to point this out too. I think the Roma is a beautiful ship. The Littorio class in general are very, very pretty ships. Too bad they really didn't amount for jack shit in real life, but hey, this is a simulator game, sandboxy vanilla. we're not really going to talk about much history in this channel in regards to how it relates to game, okay? There are some acknowledgments they try to do, and I appreciate that, and I think they definitely should try to keep that and not disregard that completely before we take a jump into fantasy land, right, with F keys and all that kind of shit. But again, I understand it's a game. At the end of the day, guys, it is a video game. They're going to do what they want to do, right? With the Roma, though, another thing is that, again, she is an older ship, so I think she in the premium store, I think is she like 11,300 doubloons, I believe, which you can pick her up for. Again, I'm not really going to sit here and say that, yeah, if you already have a lot of the premium ships, go ahead and pick this one up. No, I think you could play other ships in game that are going to give you a similar kind of vibe, similar feel. But again, if you use the coupon, or if you're really looking for that one premium ship, again, guys, I do recommend this ship. I don't know what it is, man. Sometimes ships that are just renowned as like bad ships in the game by the community, I actually rather enjoy. And I'm okay sticking my head out here and saying, you know what? This ship, the Roma, I really enjoy, and I actually get fairly good results in her, okay? I don't know what it is, but it just is what it is, right? I'm sure everyone out there has their kind of ships too. Like another one for me is the Neptune. I think the Neptune, a lot of people think is trash. I get phenomenal results in my Neptune, and I love her to death. But again, everyone's different. I understand, right? But when I really sat there and played the Roma, and I really tried thinking about what this ship does and why people were having so much frustration in her, I really did learn a lot when it came to what I'm telling you guys. And it taught me so much that when my buddy got it in his Santa container, and I told him, hey, X, Y, and Z, you have to do this, 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 and aim at this, and pull the trigger at this, he actually started getting really good results, and now he likes the Roma as well, and he knows who I'm talking about, right? Shout out to Jacques on the Roma here. So but yeah, so like again, Pensacola strictly nose in, right? Again, that's frustrating because your shells go any which way. No, we're hitting the target, but again, most battleships do that. Maybe some battleships get like 1 or 2 penetrations, but most battleships will miss at that because of the way the dispersion is and how it is. But, you know, I think a big thing that the community forgets when it comes to battleship balance, okay? We just expect that the norm is overpowered performing BBs like the Christopher Colombo, the Libertad, the Ohio, right? A lot of these ships, it's expected that that's just the norm, and it frustrates me because somewhere along the lines we just forgot what kind of balances the battleship class, which is the inconsistency of the main battery guns. Because if you get incredibly consistent main battery guns, you completely nullify a class in this game, which is the cruisers, right? And it's frustrating because I've seen this shift, and I know I'm going on a little bit of a rant here, but hey, you know what? It's worth talking about. And I've seen this shift in game where, you know, now we're getting, I mean, I think at normal, I'm getting 5 battleship, you know, games per team. And I'm getting like 2 cruiser games with that. And as a battleship player, I'm sitting here, I'm like, this isn't fun because I want there to be more cruisers so I have more ships that I know I can do effective damage towards. Now I'm having to shoot other enemy battleships that arguably some of them don't have citadels or you can't really hit them. And it's frustrating to me. It is. It's really frustrating. And it kind of brings me into some of the things I'll make. I don't want to like talk about all this because this is stuff I have saved for later videos on my channel that I have planned. But like look at the new Thor line coming out with, you know, radar, the emergency speed boost, the torpedoes, the insane AA, the rail guns, like, which is very similar to the Roma, I might add, but there are some differences, and I'll make sure to point that out when I do a review on the Thor and all that stuff as we continue when that ship line gets released. It's just frustrating because I think we've completely power crept a class of ships in this game, right? I mean, even with the addition, you know, of the aircraft carriers and with the addition of submarines, right? Battleships have the longest ASW range and they can take the most amount of hits and have the greatest survivability. And now we're giving them tools that cruisers used to have solely, and it's okay. Like before it was what? The Bordino and the Missouri were the 2 radar battleships. And now we want to give an entire line radar BBs, you know, radar BBs. It's just like, it's one thing after another. And now we have the Rhode Island, right, which is an incredible power crept a lot of BBs in this game, which is like, why do you even play cruisers anymore, right? There's that kind of stigma. And as a cruiser main, I am sympathizing, and these are my thoughts because I'm seeing it, right? Now, I don't want to say cruisers are irrelevant. They're not. Cruisers are not irrelevant, and I will defend that till the day I die. But it has definitely increased the level of difficulty and skill needed to play the cruiser class. It is not an easy ship class to play, even with the addition of, smokescreen cruisers, which again, I'm not the biggest fan of. That's just me personally. It doesn't really they rely solely on their smokescreen. If they don't have their smokescreen, they're toast basically, because the amount of ships with large overmatching AP, even some battle cruisers and super cruisers have that, and it's just like, well, fuck, right? It's frustrating. Okay, I know that was a long tangent, but again, it directly implies and goes into what I'm trying to talk about with the Roma, with these shells, and the Roma's from a time when battleships were just designed differently from wargaming. Okay, I like the Roma because it laid the foundations for what was to become the Soviet BB line, which again, in another previous video that I made, I actually recommend the Soviet BB line as the very first BB line you should go down, because I think it teaches you everything you need to know about battleships that are applicable to every other nation. And the grind is not like, the grind is pretty fun. I think of all the ships, I'm going down all of them, the Pyotr, the Izmail, the Sinop, the Vlad, the Svitsoyuz, the Kremlin, like every single ship in that line from tier 5 up, even the tier 4, is fun. And there's no like stinkers in that line. Whereas I know a lot of people will highlight like the Montana as a very good line to learn, but there are a lot of stinkers in that line, especially for me. I mean, I don't mind the New York, but the New Mexico I think is dog shit. I don't like the Colorado particularly, right? Some people hate the North Carolina because of the shells, right? Until like the Iowa and Montana, and that's when people really start liking it. So again, I think that this ship, if you like the Soviet BBs, or vice versa, if you like this ship, you should do what I'm talking about. You should go down the Soviet BB line, or you should maybe consider picking up the Roma, because the Roma does everything well, other than the two things I highlighted, which are massive flaws to this ship. But again, I told you one way to mitigate it, right? And how you should be utilizing your stealth and how you should be utilizing your guns when you're aiming. Again, look at this salvo on a DD. It happens. Like, the stars align every now and then, and you get really, really good salvos. I mean, that was what, 4, 5, 6, 7 shells landed on target? I mean, that's unheard of in the Roma. That is unheard of, guys. That is probably the best dispersion or just shot I had my entire playthrough with the Roma, okay? So you can't expect things like that. But then again, I fired, I fell off detection, and then the Flandre pops around the island at, what, 11.9, 12 kilometers, and I'm already off detection, so I can turn out, angle my ship, and then I can go ahead and start the engagement against the Flandre. Like, this ship offers so much. If you know how to play her, she is a fantastic vessel. And I love this ship, and I will say it, I think this ship is great. But I understand why people hate her, or definitely dislike her. But again, she's fun. Now, here's the thing. Is she competitive? I'm probably going to go with no, because you need to have consistency in competitive game modes, okay? How's her carry potential? Probably not as high as those ships that have the higher carry potential and just are higher and better in regards of like the tier. Like the Ipiranga jumps out at me as a very competitive. The Lenin, right, is a very, very strong ship. So there are some vessels, right, that hop at me that are like very, very strong for its tier. The Roma I wouldn't consider very strong. I would consider her pretty damn good, because she's fun, she offers a lot of credit reward, and she's interesting to play. And I think that's maybe the whole premise of the video, is why I wanted to make this video, is because I really want to highlight the ships that Wargaming used to make were interesting. They weren't based upon an F key, they weren't based around consumables, they were just baked into the ship, okay? Like, one thing I really like about this game is really to influence a way to play a game, or play a ship line and make that ship line fun, is the American BBs. They have that upgrade module in slot 6 that decreases, what, dispersion by 11%. Like, why hasn't that ever made a resurgence? Or the one that you can get the aiming systems, whatever, in slot 2 for the Yubari, right? Or slot 1, or whatever it is. Like, those things, those like unique, like very critically rare, nation only, ship only upgrades are cool. I like that because it alters the way that you would play the ship and or line. And I think that's fun. Instead of going into this consumable heavy, F key heavy, gimmick heavy thing, I like the ships are just good and it's baked into the vessels. That, like, again, maybe that's why I like the Soviet BB line, because the dispersion getting better and better and better as the closer you get to the target is just, it's baked in. And I like that. I like those kind of ships. Those are fun for me. Ships like the Libertad, are just not fun for me. Press an F key and my damage goes up somehow magically because we start loading like more damaging shells or higher damaging shells or other bullshit things like the sap, the 16 sap that's now accurate and slaps enemy ships for 20,000 damage and there's nothing you can do about it. Or the Valparaiso that can just churn out what 200,000 HP in a given match based on its F keys and heal spam it can just do as a zombie ship. Like it's gotten to the point where it's ridiculous, right? And I would hope that wargaming would really start issuing in just better design philosophies. And I was hopeful when I saw, I was excited when the Pan-European branch of Battleships got released. I'm like, yes, this is gonna be cool. I like it. And then I look at what it gets and I'm like, no, why? Why is it getting all that? And again, I'll talk about those ships later on. I don't want to get too much into those or too heavy on those because they're not released yet, and it's really not worth talking about until they get released. Again, there's many changes that could still happen to those ships. So, but again, the Roma hasn't been touched in centuries. So again, that's why I like her. She's just interesting and fun. And I know I didn't highlight her armor scheme. Her armor scheme is awesome. She can be Citadel by all means, but she has a great heavy tanky armor layout that can shrug off a lot of shells if you angle her correctly. A big weakness on the Roma that was highlighted years ago by other CCs and YouTube and content creators is that her roof, Citadel plating and all that isn't that thick, but is just perfect to armor piercing bombs. So if you're fighting August von Parsifal's, God damn it, if you get into like other AP bombing ships, Manfred Richthofen, just to name two for the German nation of CVs. Yeah, this ship will eat Citadels for days. It's not hard to Citadel this thing with those AP bombs, right? And I'm assuming that the Shinano doesn't give a fuck either because it's skip bombs. So, and that's AP skip bombs, right? But yeah, to sum up the Roma, I don't want to sit too much here and talk about various other things about the game. Where this game already has enough negative shit, and that's not really what I founded this channel for. This ship is fun, and I can't recommend her enough to you guys for a first time premium buy or just for a pickup casual. And if you did happen to get this ship via Santa containers and played her once and you were incredibly frustrated but now stumbled upon this video, I urge you to build your ship the way I have my ship built, and I urge you to pick your spots when you shoot your guns and play it the way I'm trying to illustrate for you. Again, I'm not telling you, again, if you want to disregard me and tell me I'm wrong, by all means. I'm not that kind of YouTuber that's like, my word is fucking law and I'm ship Jesus. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to help people that think like, oh, I just bought this ship or I got this ship and it's the biggest waste of, biggest piece of dog shit I've ever played and it's a waste of money. I'm just trying to show you it's not as bad as you think it is. This ship is actually pretty damn fun to play and I think she's quite good. She's not the most competitive, but hey, you know what? Sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes we don't play the game for the competitive element. We play the game because it's a fun game. We enjoy it. We like the ships. A lot of us are historical nerds, and we like, history. And this ship has a lot of it. It does. But like I said, I'm going to say it one more time, just to reiterate my point. She's fun. And I think she is worth a try for you. And I think if you kind of buy into the things that I taught you, or not taught you, sounds bad, the things that I illustrated for you and told you about how to mitigate some of her weaknesses and how to use her concealment to her, as a big strength instead of trying to pick on broadsides for cruisers, do the things I told you, and I think you're going to get better results out of her Roma. A little bit more consistently, right? This ship is very inconsistent. You have to know that going into it, but again, she can have success. All it takes is the right scenarios, recognizing it, and buying into what I said. Okay? I'm going to leave you here with the post-battle screen. Both games I had were very good. This one was probably the best one I had for 177,000 damage. And like always, guys, have a good one, and peace out.